Hello everybody and welcome to Mother Rabbit's Kitchen. This is episode 1 of a brand new series that I kind of thought of recently because we made a huge life change recently after stumbling upon a podcast interview. You might be familiar with the YouTube channel Farmhouse on Boone, Lisa Bass, very knowledgeable, all things sourdough, all things homesteading, not all things homesteading, some things homesteading, and all things homemaking and from scratch everything. So she's really interesting to follow. She has a podcast also called Simple Farmhouse Life where she interviewed this amazing woman named Sue Becker, whom I had never heard of before, but I was listening to this interview and by the end of the interview I was like, okay, huge life change. We are switching to milling our own flour from here on out. I would love to share all of the reasons why we decided to do that, but there are so many that I would just encourage you to check out that interview, which I will link below, and also Sue Becker's YouTube channel and her website, I guess. They have a company called Bread Beckers, kind of like bread bakers, but the last name Becker. So Bread Beckers, probably breadbeckers.com is the website, I'm guessing, but they also have a Bread Beckers YouTube channel, and she does a podcast called Sue's Healthy Minutes. And she is just a wealth of knowledge about the nutrients that are given to us through wheat itself, the whole grain, and when you mill it yourself, how the nutrients are retained and then stay in your bread and go straight into your body when you eat that bread, and just incredible things happen. We are already experiencing it as a family just within a few days of milling our own grain. So I am going to take you through a recipe for, it's technically a sourdough discard sandwich bread. You don't need to have discard on hand to make this bread. You can just simply substitute with a little extra flour and water. We'll talk about that in a second. So it is discard sandwich bread, but it's also just sandwich bread if you don't have the discard. No big deal. The main thing we're focusing on is these incredible ingredients. So I ordered recently from it's called Country Life Natural Foods. I ordered this organic hard red wheat, which is a really good wheat for making breads and bagels and that kind of thing. So it looks like this. I will share something that I learned that just blew my mind. I have been baking and cooking for a million years, and I always use either all-purpose flour or my, still on the counter, but I'm probably gonna get rid of it soon, just my bread flour here. And I would use my bread flour. Sometimes I would mix in some whole wheat flour, my King Arthur whole wheat flour, to make bread and sourdough and all that good stuff. But I never really understood what a wheatberry was and what the difference between white flour that we get at the store, what the difference between the white flour was and whole wheat flour, and what the difference between 100% whole wheat flour that you buy from the store and 100% whole wheat flour that you get when you mill your own grain. There is a huge difference. So first let's talk about the difference between white flour and whole wheat flour. The white flour that was introduced into our country about 100 years ago is nice and soft and fluffy and yummy, but there's a reason for that. It's because they take these precious wheat berries that are packed with nutrients. These wheat berries are made up of 3 parts. Part 1, the wheat germ. Part 2, the bran. And part 3 is the endosperm. Now, when flour is milled and then sifted to make white flour, what they do is actually take away 2 of the 3 parts. They happen to take away the 2 most nutrient-dense parts, the wheat germ and the wheat bran. Those are discarded, and you are left with just the endosperm, which is that soft white part that's basically just starch with a little protein, and it makes fluffy bread. Let's just call it what it is. It makes some delicious fluffy bread. We will get to in a second the mind-blowingly delicious whole wheat bread that you can make when you make it from your own whole grains. I didn't know whole wheat bread could be so soft and fluffy. Anyway, we'll get there. So that 1/3 of the wheat berry, that's the least nutritious part, is sold to us as white flour up until I don't know, a couple of months ago, I didn't know that about white flour. I didn't know, I mean, I knew it was different than whole wheat. We all know that whole wheat is better than white nutritionally. I just didn't really understand why. I didn't realize they actually sifted away the 2/3 of the wheat berry, the most nutrient dense parts of the wheat berry. It's just very sad when you think about it and the history of white flour, when you learn more about it and the problems, the health problems it caused in our country, and then how they tried to get around that. Instead of saying, oh, we'll go back to whole grain, they just were like, okay, we'll keep the white fluffy flour that everybody loves and we'll just kind of inject it with synthetic nutrients to balance things out and to make people stop getting so sick. And it kind of worked, but we have so many health problems in our country now that really can be attributed to the removal of these really nutrient dense parts of the grain. When you mill your flour, it starts to lose its nutrients. I think they say within like 72 hours. So when you compare it with, even if you buy high quality organic flour in a bag from the store, it's been sitting for weeks, months, I don't know how long. It has lost a lot of nutrients because after those 72 hours, the nutrients just kind of start to fade away. When you mill it yourself, you are locking in all of those amazing nutrients and bringing them right into your body, right into your kids' bodies, and we use all those nutrients. So that is the huge benefit of milling your own grain. You mill it, you use it, you cook it, and then once it's cooked, it's locked in. It's, all those nutrients stay locked in, they go right into your body. Now, before I continue and start sounding like I totally know what I'm talking about, I'm really just sharing what I have learned recently. I'm not any kind of genius on this kind of thing. I'm just trying to educate myself, and I want to share that with you because my mind has been blown over the last couple of weeks, months, however long it's been. So I've been wanting to get my hands on a grain mill. Hope you can see that. This is my Nutri-Mill. It was not as expensive as I thought it was going to be. They have some really expensive models. I think the mock mill models can get really expensive when they go for the more aesthetically pleasing ones, the wood ones, which I kind of feel like they have like an awkward look to them. If you look at the spout, it just kind of looks weird. Anyway, if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But I think they look a little weird. I don't think they're that aesthetically pleasing, and they can be like almost $1,000. So this one was on sale for $249, and it has been incredible. I've heard of people using them for decades and not having problems at all and not having to replace it. So $250 to make this nutrient-dense, nutrient-rich bread, totally worth every penny. And so where was I going with this? Let me take a sip of my tea. Okay, so once I learned about these precious wheat berries that can be used in whole for bread and make incredibly delicious and nutritious bread and rolls and bagels and muffins and cookies and graham crackers and all that good stuff. It's like once you learn that stuff, you can't unlearn it. So you can't, for me personally, I just can't go back to bread the way it was. So I don't know if I already said this, but I'm calling this series Make America Grain Again. Get it, guys? Make America Grain Again. If you're ready to stop watching because of my ridiculous puns, I understand, but you're gonna miss out on a really good recipe. So stick around. I'll try not to make ridiculous puns anymore, but I can't promise that I'm gonna stop doing this because it's really fun. Get your hands on some wheat berries because you could do this all day. Your kids can do this. This might entertain them for a few minutes and give you a little break while you're getting your ingredients together. What I have here is all of the wheat berries I will need to make 2 huge loaves of this sandwich bread. I use bread pans that are actually 1.5 pound bread pans. They're pretty huge. A lot of people just use the 1 pound. If you just have the 1 pound loaf pans, this recipe will make 3 loaves for you. For me, because I use these enormous bread pans, which I'll grab in a second, these enormous bread pans are 1.5 pounds, so this will make 2 enormous loaves. We have a family of 6. We go through it pretty quickly when we cut our slices. We cut them thick. One of the most exciting parts of this journey is realizing that bread is no longer a bad thing to eat. It's no longer a thing that we really need to limit or pass up. You know, when you go out to a restaurant and you try to like avoid, you're like, oh no, they're gonna bring the bread and I'm gonna be so tempted. Well, yeah, that's still the case because they're probably serving, you know, white bread. But now our lives have changed. It's more like, hey, what are we having for dinner? And what will I serve with bread? Because bread, if you think of it biblically, breaking bread and serving bread, Jesus being the bread of life, like it makes so much sense. Again, mind blown. It's like it all starts to fall into place and you're like, okay, this makes sense why whole grains are the most important food group, how bread is supposed to be served at every meal with dinner, and we're supposed to be able to enjoy it and fill up on it because it's not just the starchy bread that we thought we were supposed to stay away from. It's nutrient dense, fiber filled, and satisfying, delicious bread that we don't ever have to feel guilty about. In fact, we should make sure we're incorporating it into our meals every day. So enough talking, let's talk about the ingredients of this bread. Like I mentioned before, this is technically a sourdough discard sandwich bread. You do not have to have sourdough discard to make this bread. I do because I also make sourdough, which I'm making another video about whole wheat sourdough, which look for that. I'm not sure which one's gonna come out first. I technically called that episode 2, so let's call this episode 1. I'll try to get this one out first because sourdough takes 2 days, so we'll finish that one tomorrow. So this is just some sourdough discard that I have. I've already measured this out to be 200 grams, and we're gonna do about 580 grams of water, which I measured out over here, 60 grams of honey, a little more than a stick of butter. I usually grab a stick and then just like an extra tablespoon, 14 grams of active yeast, 20 grams of salt. I have switched over to Redmond real salt, unrefined salt. It is gorgeous, it's delicious, I highly recommend it. And then of course we need our wheat berries. So I have here a little over 1,000 grams, just for anything that gets caught or left over in the mill bowl. And then also so I have any left over in case I need to add a little extra flour to my dough if it looks a little wet. So we're gonna start by milling our grain. If you'd like to see a nice whoopsie video in my other video, the sourdough wheat bread episode, I accidentally did not press this drawer all the way in, and I started milling the grain for the first time on camera and it started shooting out the side. It was a whole fun thing. You have to make sure it's pushed all the way in. I'm gonna take off the top here and pour in our grain. And put the top back on. This reduces the noise a little bit, but it is also fun to watch the grain being milled and kind of not being sucked down, but being shimmied down into the mill. So we're gonna put the lid on, and I have it set to a fine grain because I like it pretty fine. So we're just gonna turn the power on. I'm gonna turn it to about 12 o'clock to get a nice fine grain. Here we go. Looks like in the little drawer here. So all you have to do is pull out. It's a little bit of a messy job, but I just kind of tap it. Oh, it smells so good. Tap it, and then this part just catches like the finest ground parts. Feel it. It is just gorgeous. Freshly milled. You can see the different colors in there. Can you see that? You can see like the softer, lighter parts and then a little bit of the darker, coarser parts. It is just gorgeous. I don't think I told you that this bread is more delicious than the white bread. I did not know that whole wheat bread could be tasty. Before I started milling my own grains, I say that as if I've been doing this for years. Before I started milling my own grains a few days ago, I had experimented with incorporating 100% whole wheat flour, you know, your King Arthur flour. Nothing against King Arthur, you guys are great, but just store-bought whole wheat flour. I had incorporated that into some of my recipes, but I never really went more than a 50-50 ratio because I found that the more whole wheat flour you put in, the denser, drier, and more cardboardy and just not tasty the bread was. I also felt like you needed to add some vital wheat gluten to make it rise a little bit better, to make it a little fluffy, a little bit chewy. And it just really wasn't successful. So I was afraid that after milling, I was afraid that I was gonna experience the same thing and regret everything. I was wrong. With this freshly milled flour, it's different flour. I don't know how to explain it other than it's all about it being freshly milled, used right away, all of these nutrients, everything is just perfectly intact. And I mean, it's milled, but all the nutrients are intact. Nothing is processed, nothing has been sitting on a shelf. And it makes the most delicious, fluffiest, softest, pillowy bread. I've also made it into rolls that are incredible. We'll do another video for shaping rolls and doing it that way. But anyway, so I just wanted to share that this is going to be the best bread you've ever had. I'm just gonna say it. It's gonna be the best bread you've ever had. So get yourself a mill and start grinding your flour, then watch the video again and make it with me and tell me how much you love it. Okay, let's get started actually mixing everything together and diving in to this bread. Okay, so to our mixing bowl of a stand mixer, we are going to start by adding our 200 grams of this starter. Now let me go back to starter discard. Let me go back to, you don't need this. If you don't use discard or starter, whatever you want to call it, if you don't use this, all you have to do is increase your flour by 100 grams and increase your water by 100 grams, because this is simply 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of water, give or take in this. So that's what you would increase in your other ingredients if you don't use this. Put all of this in here. It already looks good. And we've just added one ingredient. 580 grams of water. This is room temperature on the warm side. 60 grams of honey. So I'm gonna get out my little kitchen scale here. Set it to 0. I'm gonna do about 60 grams of honey. Butter. This is the about 90, whoa, splashing of butter. About 9 tablespoons of that soft butter. 14 grams, I think it's actually measured out to 15 grams of active dry yeast. Yeah, active dry yeast. So 14 grams of that. Here's my freshly milled flour. To add it. Since I did go over when I weighed it out. Okay, so I literally just have I don't know, a half of a tablespoon in there, but I'm gonna leave that there because I'm gonna always add it as it's mixing, and we're just gonna let this stand and mix. That's why they call it a stand mixer. We're gonna let it stand and mix for about 12 minutes on level 2. Were you watching that going, you forgot to add the salt? Forgot to add the salt. Here goes my salt. Come on, salt. That would be bad. Don't let me do that again. Okay, so that has been kneading for a while. I'm just gonna take a look at it. It looks nice and kneaded. What I'm looking for right now is the elasticity of the bread, that gluten development. Oh, it's nice and heavy. So I still had a little extra flour left in my bowl from the mill. It didn't look like it needed any because it did not look like too wet of a dough. So I'm just pulling. Oh, look how good that looks. Can you see that? Can you see that you can actually see light coming through? I'm able to stretch this bread so thinly that I can see light through it. That's called the window pane test. That's how you know that gluten has developed really well. Your bread isn't gonna fall apart and get crummy and crumbly when you cut into it. It's just gonna maintain that structure. It's gonna have a nice mouthfeel, have a nice chew to it. Look, I can keep stretching that. And that's the thing about whole wheat that gets a bad rap. They say that whole wheat is denser, and they tell you to add the vital wheat gluten, which I have vital wheat gluten because I used to add it when I was using the store-bought whole wheat. This freshly milled doesn't need it. Look, I mean, that's a glutinous structure. I mean, you could like lift weights with this and it won't break. I mean, it is, I'm kidding. I don't lift weights. If I did, I don't lift weights, I lift bread. Okay, so we're looking at that. It is just so beautiful. Now, what I am gonna do is gonna get a little oil for my bowl. I'll be back. Oh. Another big change that we have made in our family is to eliminate the seed oils. So there's no more vegetable oil in our house. I do confess I used vegetable oil in baking. There are some recipes that I haven't tried yet substituting the vegetable oil, but I am using a single estate olive oil, a high quality olive oil that is from the island of Crete in Greece. And you always want like a single estate, single origin olive oil. There's a whole thing about that in Sue Becker's podcast, which was very informative. You can also use avocado oil or coconut oil. Are there any others? There are probably others. Lay them down in the comments for me. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a tiny drizzle just to coat this bowl. And I like to flip my dough around a couple of times. I'm gonna add a little more. Boop. That's just another little drop. Moisture is good. Olive oil is good for you when it's a high quality olive oil. So do that bread dip, drizzle it with olive oil, no guilt. I mean, what could be better news than bread and olive oil are good for you? I mean, this is amazing news. It's 2025, best news of the year. Eat more bread, dip it in olive oil, better for you. I'm happy. So this is nicely coated. My bowl is coated with the olive oil, and I'm just gonna let it sit in the bowl covered with some wrap for about an hour. But I have noticed that this usually rises really well and quickly. So this might only take like 40 minutes, depending on how warm your house is. Let this rest for an hour, and we'll be back to form the loaves. This dough rose pretty quickly. I didn't really time it, but I just kind of turned around after I was working with my sourdough, and it has risen all the way to the top. You can see it kind of coming over the edge, pushing up on that plastic wrap, and that is what you want to see. You don't want to leave it too long and have it, you might say, whoa, look at that huge rise that's coming over the top. That actually weakens it in the end, so you don't want to overproof it. You just want it to kind of double in size. I'm going to take this off carefully because I like to reuse this wrap after I get it into my loaf pans. I'm just going to lay this like so. And let me tell you about my loaf pans, or continue telling you about them. These are USA pans, which is a really great brand, very non-stick, obviously made in the USA, and just highly recommended. You can get them from Amazon. Just don't put them in the dishwasher, because my husband did, and I had to buy them again because they got ruined. So not dishwasher safe, but really, really good pans. And these are the 1.5 pound pans. You can see how large they are. And then when the bread rises, and it's gonna be some huge bread. I can barely fit it in my bread box. My kids' sandwiches that I make at school, people comment, they're like, what is that bread? Yeah, so they're big, and I like it that way. I like big bread, and I cannot lie. Didn't I tell you I wasn't gonna do puns again? I lied. Anyway, I'm going to spray my loaf pans with my avocado spray pretty liberally, because we did switch over from that Pam spray. I try not to use that anymore, but sadly, it worked really well. And my avocado spray, I really have to kind of saturate it in order to get it to work, and still I get a tiny bit of sticking. What I do to prevent it from really sticking is I let the cooked bread stay in the pan for a few minutes, and that just allows it to come out of the pan easier. With my Pam spray, I could just pop it right out of the pan. I don't know. See, that dough is nice and jiggly. I'm gonna punch it down, deflate it, and then I just kind of gather it. And plop it out. Boop. See, no sticking because we used our olive oil before. And you can, if you want to be like really even Steven about your loaves, you can weigh them after you cut them to make sure they're perfectly even in weight. But I usually just eyeball it and I try to go perfectly halvesies. You don't really know if it's perfect until your bread comes out, but it generally is really good. And I just kind of like flip them over. That looks pretty halvesies. I am going to take one of my, how do I usually do this? Put this one over here for a second. So I'm going to take my dough and just start kind of pushing it and rolling it. Kind of stretches it out a little bit. It just increases the tension in the dough and gives it that sturdiness that you want. And then whatever seam I have, I just try to kind of leave it tucked underneath. Make it nice and compact, like a swaddled baby ready for a nap. And then you just plop it in your pan. And I'll do my other one. So I'm just gonna, I grab it, I start folding it, almost like cinnamon roll-like. I don't know. There's something very satisfying about this process. And just getting that roll nice and tight. Seam on the bottom. Slap it a little bit. Plop it right in your pan. And then I'm gonna cover them. See them in there, they look pretty even. I'm gonna cover it with, which side was the, this was. I'm gonna cover it with that same plastic wrap so I don't waste. And then I usually just set this on top of my stove as long as it's obviously not hot. I set it on top of my stove because I always keep my light, it's like my microwave light that goes down towards the oven. I always keep that light on because I like the way it looks, and the warmth from it will help this rise. If I'm ever in a rush and I'm like, I need to cook this bread quickly before I leave, I usually will just kind of set my oven on to 375 and let it just stay on to give a warm environment for this to rise a little bit faster. I'm not in any huge rush right now, so I'm just gonna set it on the oven, keep the oven off, and this will take anywhere from like a half hour to an hour to give it second rise. We want it to dome a little bit over the top, and then we will get it into the oven. Check out that beautiful second rise on those sandwich loaves. I just preheated my oven to 375. I'm gonna toss those in the oven. We'll gently toss them into the oven for, at first, just 15 minutes. Then we're gonna cover the tops with foil and bake for 20 more minutes. So a total of, what is that, 35 minutes? A total of 35 minutes, 15 minutes foil off, 20 minutes foil on. Here we go. Just be very careful when you're taking off the plastic wrap. Do more of a peel than a pull so you don't mess with that beautiful bubbly rise. And then I'm just gonna put them in the oven carefully. Ooh, that's a hot oven. Oh. Be careful not to bang them on the oven rack, so we'll pop the beautiful bubbles. We'll put that in, 15 minutes. And then we'll come back and put a little foil over the top for the last 20 minutes. The 15-minute timer just went off, so I just have this tin foil that I have reused many, many times. I'm going to put it over the top of the bread in here. Just like that, lay it over the top to protect it for the last 20 minutes so it doesn't get too brown on the top. And that's it. Timer went off, so I'm gonna take everything out of the oven. Just gonna pull off this little tin foil right here. Let's see how pretty these are. So pretty. This one, I actually did get them pretty even Steven without weighing them. Isn't that pretty? These smell so good. The whole house smells amazing from this fresh bread. I'm gonna try to release them. I did oil the pans pretty well, but this avocado oil doesn't work as beautifully as the pan. Oh, this is what I get for doing natural ingredients. So we're gonna let this sit for about 5 minutes until the moisture kind of releases a little bit. But you know, another way to tell that these are done, if your oven's a little bit different than mine and your timing's different, you can feel that these actually feel like rock hard. It almost has like a hollow feeling, like it's just a crust with like nothing inside, which of course is not true. There's beautiful soft bread inside. It feels so hard on the top, but you will be amazed that in like 10, 20 minutes, you'll be able to just like squish down on this bread. It's just going to, the moisture will even out. I'll be able to get it out of the pans, and then I'll show you how soft and fluffy this is. Okay, 10 minutes has passed, and like I said, it went from rock hard to this. Watch. See how soft that is? It's gonna get even softer as it cools, but I'm gonna try to take it out of the pans now that it's softened up. And it's still harder than when I use the pan. Those dang chemicals make it easier, but oh, there we go. There we go. All right. I'm just gonna flip it over. Isn't that just, it's a little hot, so look how beautiful, and it is soft. See the little seam we had on, look how soft. Guys, look at the softness. This is a soft and fluffy loaf of bread. It smells so good. Look, I'm like actually like squeezing it. It is so soft. Okay, I'm gonna get the other one. Try to dump it out. Come on now. There, release it. All right. It smells incredible. A nice, soft, fluffy. I wish you could feel this. I wish you could smell it. And I wish you could taste it. You will when you make it on your own. Look at that. I could just squish this all day. So they're just after 10 minutes of cooling, they are cool enough to be able to hold. I would recommend waiting another at least half hour before slicing into it, because if you slice into it while it's warm, all that, the heat that's still in the bread will release that moisture through the slices. So you want to have a little bit of self-control and wait till it's warm. You can always toast it if you want the slices warmed up. Oh my gosh, I just can't stop squishing. Can't stop squishing the bread. It's like when a baby has really cute squishy cheeks. You just want to keep squishing. All right, we'll be back to slice. I'm gonna slightly break my own rule because it's still a little bit warm, but I want to crack into this. I want to show you how pretty and soft it is on the inside, and I also want to taste it. See how soft as I cut through it? Nice and soft. Look at that. Come on, 100% whole wheat bread, that soft? Are you kidding me? Can you see it? That soft. That's how soft we're talking. Look at that. Keeps its shape. All right, let's cut off a real slice. Look at that. It's still a little bit warm. A little butter. Oh my gosh. So quiet. I have 2 family members behind the camera waiting for their slice. All right, Sky. And tasty taste. Mm-hmm. Mmm. 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 You have butter on your nose. I'll make you another slice, go. Mmm. Say hi. Mmm. Mmm. Mm-hmm. The softest.
I'm gonna play push hands.
Come here.
Yeah, Mom.
Tell me if this is the softest, fluffiest bread you've ever had in your life.
It is.
Okay. wants
just
to.
when Jana pushes us. It's not
No, I
happening again.
don't know if I like that idea.
What about Trippy Trippy?
Hubby wants a slice toasted with peanut butter and honey, so I'm gonna make
Mama?
that for him.
Can we walk and then Jana trips us?
Oh no.
Please, please. Yes!
No, I said I don't think I like that idea. So what I'm gonna do, since this is still warm and I don't want all of the moisture to leave, I'm just gonna put the cap back on the bread. I put the cap back on, push it up against the other thing of bread so it can cool and not lose all that moisture. Because I broke my rule. I cut it while it was still warm, but totally worth it.